These days, when we watch a movie and enjoy it, we usually say, "This is cinema," attributing it to a meme where it appears as if legendary filmmaker Martin Scorsese is saying it. But what do we mean when we say, "This is cinema"? You know what? Let's back this up. What makes a movie cinema? Is it the acting, the directing, the story, the music, the visuals? Let's face it, there are so many things that can make a movie resonate with so many people, from the most basic normie moviegoer to the most refined professional critic that hates anything that isn't artsy and underground. But if I had to pick one movie, probably 3 movies, that define so many things that I love and understand about filmmaking for the rest of my life to come, I would look no further than the Trolls trilogy. Oh, and also these movies, I guess. I always knew that ever since I started making video essays on this channel, I had to make one on the Back to the Future movies at some point. And guess what? That video essay's finally here! Because if my last video essay was about an anime I personally loved, it made perfect sense to follow up that one with a movie I personally love. Plus it's 2 sequels, because why not? The Back to the Future trilogy is a movie trilogy that I hold close to my heart. Yes, on the surface, there are 3 movies about an average 80s teenager and a funny scientist guy who go on wacky time travel adventures together in a weird looking car. But looking deeper into these movies, there's so much more than that. And I'm not talking about how the first one is one of the most Freudian rom-coms of the 80s. I'm talking about how these are some of the most uplifting, relatable, emotionally resonant, and visually stunning movies of its time. In other words, it's just so much fun.
What did I tell you? 88 miles per hour!
I'd even argue that the first Back to the Future is to sci-fi what Die Hard is to action, in the sense that these are 80s classics that the films they've inspired have tried to replicate their successes ever since.
Back to the Future. Yes, Eric Stoltz is your boy in that movie. What an embodied performance. You mean Michael J. Fox?
Are you seriously telling me that your plan to save the universe is based on Back to the Future?
Sorry, Doc, I need your DeLorean.
Hello?
What's that?
Nothing. It's a weather experiment.
Oh.
That being said, it should come to no surprise to anybody that the original Back to the Future is a timeless classic. I remember my dad owning a Lego set of the DeLorean time machine from the movies. No, not that one. That's the one. And this was back when LEGO Ideas was still called LEGO Caruso. What does Caruso even mean? Who knows, really? And I remember building this thing all by myself. This was definitely one of the longest and most frustrating LEGO sets I've ever built when I was younger. But at the end of the day, it was all worth it because you could customize it to resemble the DeLorean's design from any of the 3 films. This inspired me to own this DVD box set containing the entire trilogy. And there I was, at 11 years old, watching the entire trilogy back to back to back in one go. And nothing's been the same ever since. Okay, so I have here with me the original Back to the Future trilogy DVD box set. I got this as a Christmas present over 9 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So I have here with me all 3 DVDs of the movie, so I'm gonna start and go one by one. So I have here with me the original Back to the Future DVD, the first one. So this is what the back looks like. I will admit the cover looks weird because of the fonts used. Like, the names are in impact. So does the tagline for some reason. So I'm just gonna open up the DVD real quick. Oh my god, the bubble wrap that came with the DVD fell. So this is what it looks like. I don't know if it's on camera. There you go. So this is part 2. So this middle is way more dented than the first for some reason. I guess it's because of time. This is what the back cover looks like, and inside is the DVD. I don't know what's with the bubble wraps, honestly. I guess it's for protection. I don't know, the disc isn't and then we have part 3. I also forgot to mention that all 3 DVDs have an ad for Universal Studios Japan, and I think it's because the Back to the Future ride was still there at the time that these DVDs came out, but now it's been replaced by, I forgot if it was a Despicable Me ride or a Harry Potter ride. I have not caught up with theme parks in quite a while. So this is what the DVD looks like. All of them have bubble wraps for some reason, and I don't know why. There you go. Okay. There you go. All 3 Back to the Future movies in the palm of my hands. Oh my god. There you go. There you go. Back to the Future. There are just so many things that I love about this movie that it's hard to even fathom. It was actually a lot harder to list down my personal favorite moments from this movie than I did with Your Name, and there were just as many things that I loved about it. I could list down a million reasons why Back to the Future is one of the best movies I've ever seen, but then this video would be just as long as the entire trilogy. I guess I can start by saying that I've always loved the opening credits to this movie. It's like a long tracking shot of almost nothing but clocks, save for a news report on stolen plutonium and Marty McFly destroying a giant amplifier. Still sounds better than that Apology ukulele song, at least. If it wasn't obvious enough, Michael J. Fox was born to play Marty McFly. He captures the spirit of an average 80s teenager so well, without making it come off too generic or stereotypical. His life seems average, yet so boring and unfulfilling, whether it's his run-of-the-mill American suburban family, or getting called out by his principal for constantly arriving to school late.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
One would even say his life isn't going so well from his rock band failing the audition, or getting clock blocked.
Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower!
He just wants to be somebody and make a name for himself in his otherwise average-ass life. And Michael J. Fox pulls off such a lovable performance as this youthful and ambitious teen who finds himself literally stranded in time. Which is even funnier considering that Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly before he was recast during filming for taking this movie too seriously. It's complicated. Look it up. But perhaps the one thing I love the most about this movie, in my own personal opinion at least, is its script. I shit you not. Back to the Future has one of the greatest scripts in cinema history. I've always loved how the opening scene set in 1985 sets up so many key plot points and jokes in this movie. From big moments like the news report about stolen plutonium, setting up Marty getting chased by the Libyans, and accidentally time traveling to 1955, or all that stuff about the clock tower setting up the film's iconic climactic scene where Marty goes back to 1985, to smaller moments like this random cafe janitor who decides to run for mayor, or Marty accidentally destroying this guy's pine trees that would become the namesake for the mall where the film's first DeLorean scene takes place. It's a film that's smart and full of wit, charm, and humor that does an amazing job dealing with the consequences of time travel, and also Crispin Glover saying, "I am your density."
I'm your density.
It's also a film that is packed to the brim with catchphrases after catchphrases. You'll almost feel like you're watching a Saturday morning cartoon.
Great Scott! Great Scott! Great Scott!
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Think, McFly. Think. Hello? Hello? Anybody home? Hey, think, McFly. Think.
Also, I don't think the set pieces get enough talk. I really love how much effort was put into making Hill Valley feel like a real place, even going as far as to build an actual courthouse that would get reused in later movies. I also love how Hill Valley is like this small city that doesn't look any different when you compare how it looks in 1985 versus how it looks in 1955. And yet Hill Valley in two different time periods feel like completely different worlds with their own sets of locations and characters. It's also filled with so many clever visual gags that aren't just for the sake of comedy, but also tells you so much about the city's history and world building. The fact that this trilogy focused so much on world building in this small-ass city is astounding. More on this when we get to part 2. I also really love Christopher Lloyd's electrifying, haha, get it, performance as Dr. Emmett Brown. This guy is maybe top 5 mad scientists in film history. I love how crazy and quirky this guy is, all while seeming like the coolest uncle of all time. I really love how he has the attributes of a crazy mad scientist, but without all of that sinister evil stuff. Crispin Glover also does a good job portraying Marty's father as this dorky sci-fi writer who learns to believe himself near the end of this movie. I think his character arc is just as big as Marty's, and I love the role reversal of this kid teaching his own dad about toughening up and standing up to his bully. Leia Thompson is also great, playing two different versions of Marty's mom, one in 1985 that perfectly captures an average 80s family mom with some of the most convincing makeup ever. I swear, this shit tricked me into thinking they invented de-aging back then. And another in 1955 who simmed for her own son so much that it's basically become the go-to punchline in stand-up comedy when this movie gets mentioned.
I know Back to the Future is a great movie and a hit movie. It's a very weird movie. I just watched it again. It has a lot of weird things in it. Two guys had to go in and sell that movie. We thought, that it would be fun for people if the boy, he went back in time and he tried to fuck his mom. We thought that would be fun. And then, but don't worry, he doesn't get to fuck the mom because this family friend named Biff shows up and he tries to rape the mom, in front of the son. And then the dad, he has to beat the rapist off of her. And we're also gonna say that a white man wrote Johnny Be Good, so we're gonna take that away from them. Well, this sounds like a fantastic movie.
Like, it's not as weird as something like Do You Love Your Mom? But it almost reaches that territory. And speaking of stand-up, Thomas F. Wilson is perfect as Biff Tannen. I love how he starts out as an average 1950s high school bully who almost destroys the sacred timeline in part 2. There's absolutely nothing redeeming about this guy and I love it. But perhaps the best character in this movie, aside from Marty, is the iconic DeLorean time machine. Like most people, I believe that this was one of the coolest time machines in pop culture ever since I was a kid. Like, who didn't want to travel back in time riding one of these things? And then as I grew older, I realized that the DeLorean time machine itself is actually one of the most misunderstood punchlines in cinema history. For those of you who don't know, the DMC DeLorean was actually infamous for its awful look and engine design. Plus the fact that even though those wing doors look cool, they're actually hilariously inconvenient in nearly every parking space ever. This car was actually meant to usher in a new age for the automobile industry when it was first manufactured, but ultimately ended up as one of the biggest commercial failures in the history of cars. Yeah, as it turns out, when you strip away all of the cool stuff that's strapped onto this thing, it's actually a really shady car, on par with that Elon Musk Cybertruck that's also hysterically awful. Hey, remember when that was a thing? Yeah, me neither. Anyways, the only reason Doc Brown made a time machine out of a DeLorean was that he wanted to, in his own words, do it with some style.
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Even if the car keeps breaking down throughout this entire trilogy.
No, not again. Come on.
Damn, I ripped the fuel line.
Damn, gotta fix that thing.
Looking back, it's actually one of the funniest gags in the first movie. One that I'd argue went over a lot of people's heads because Time Machine car looks cool. Who could blame him though, since all of the time travel sequences in this trilogy are so much fun to watch. Robert Zemeckis, at the height of his powers, directs the shit out of these scenes so well that you'll almost forgive him for making that horrible Disney Pinocchio live-action remake. Never again.
And not just an actor, an entrepreneur, nay, an influencer!
The music is also one of the best parts about this movie. Alan Silvestri's score is excellent, and I love how you get to hear that iconic Back to the Future theme in nearly every big scene in the movie. It's one of my favorite movie themes of all time, and one that I still listen to on a regular basis. There's also a scene where Marty McFly is just hanging out the back of a pickup truck while The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News plays in the background. And this song is a banger, by the way. This scene just screams 80s, and Huey Lewis is the GOAT for writing not one, but two banger songs just for this movie alone.
You like Huey Lewis and the News?
They're okay.
And of course, there's the iconic scene where Marty McFly performs Johnny Be Good, in the most blatant case of white boys stealing from black musicians since Elvis Presley became famous. Okay, but jokes aside, this is unironically one of my favorite musical numbers in cinema ever. It's such a fun scene that makes everyone watching this movie want to learn guitar. Trust me, I know. Also, the part near the end where Marty just goes sicko mode on his guitar was probably improvised and not in the script. You know, a scene in the movie is that fun when even the actors are having fun with it. This is basically the I'm Just Ken of the 80s. Like I said, there's just way too many things that I love about this movie that I can't possibly do them all justice in this segment. I haven't even talked about the part where Marty spooks his dad with Van Halen music and pretending to be Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, or how Doc Brown mispronounces gigawatt.
21 gigawatts! What the hell is a gigawatt?
But I think I've said enough, and I'm gonna leave it there. It's a movie that continues to be one of my personal favorites, and looking back, I'm really happy that this is the one that ignited my love for the art of cinema. The sequels are also pretty good too.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Back to the Future Parts 2 and 3 are very interesting sequels, in the sense that while they aren't as brilliant or as clever as the first film, they're still really fun films in their own right. They're also the rare instances of sequels to a film that actually build on the narrative instead of taking a big fat shit on it. Yes, Star Wars sequels, I'm talking to you. Part 2 in particular really focuses more on world building, timeline building, if you will, diving deeper into the future and alternate present of Marty's own life. I'd say it focuses more on the history of Hill Valley, but all these movies seem to focus around his family, so let's just say it's really weird for everyone else living here, really. One minute it's an average city, and another minute it's a dystopia nightmare. The version of 2015 is honestly really fascinating looking back for so many reasons. This movie came out in 1989, and back then, we all thought that 2015 would be such a futuristic year. Whoa, dude, we're getting flying cars, and self-facing shoes, and hoverboards in 2015. Doesn't the future look so great? Whoa. And yes, I must admit that this depiction of 2015 did get some things right about the future. From endless cash grab sequels, to 80s nostalgia, to Zoom meetings, to, air fryers? Also, this movie predicted the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, even though they were a year off, so that's also pretty cool, I guess. This movie also kinda revisits the events of the first Back to the Future through, I guess what you could call a different perspective of 1955 from a version of Marty that's already gone through his experiences back in that timeline. This movie blew my mind when I first saw it because the way they recreated the 1955 scenes from the first movie were so on point, even with the different perspectives they were showing. Plus the inclusion of the same actors playing different versions of the same character in the same scene. It hurts my head to this day how Zemeckis was even able to pull this off in 1989. Which leads me to one of the best, and also one of the worst things about this trilogy. Robert Zemeckis. I always thought he was a visionary director that made a lot of good movies outside of this trilogy, and one trick he always likes to do in his movies is that he'll always pull off some crazy technical wizardry black magic shit, like incorporating cartoon characters and live-action actors in almost every scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And part 2 is the one in the trilogy where Zemeckis does this shit the most. He goes full Zemeckis on this one, especially in the scene set in 2015 and 1955, like the CGI used on the hoverboards that surprisingly don't look all that dated, simply because actual and fully functioning hoverboards were used during filming. I almost think Robert Zemeckis was the least on our guide if hoverboards actually existed around 2015 and didn't end up looking like this. At best, some of his visual tricks in this movie actually hold up all these years later, and at worst, this was probably around the time when Zemeckis thought he could keep pulling these shticks forever and believing he could do no wrong. I watched this video essay from Patrick H. Willems, and it does a really good job explaining how Robert Zemeckis loved doing this shit so much that they eventually led to his downfall. Poor guy, he really thought that we'd actually be interested in his creepy Uncanny Valley movies, huh?
Now Zemeckis wasn't just a director who made fun comedies. Now he was a pioneer who revolutionized cinema. And he would never look back again.
And then there's part 3, which is obviously the worst one in the trilogy. But that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. On my first 2 to 3 watches, I thought that this one was kind of a boring and slow nothing burger that doesn't get interesting until the entire third act. But by my 4th rewatch, I soon began to realize that part 3 is maybe the most personal one in the entire trilogy. It's kinda like Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, two sequels to the 2018 Halloween movie that released back to back and are so tonally different from each other. Halloween Kills is a full-on balls-to-the-wall action horror movie, and terrible, while Halloween Ends is a slower, more meditative, and character-driven drama, and also terrible. That's not to say Back to the Future Parts 3 are terrible or anything, no. What I'm trying to say is, if Part 3 is a full-on balls-to-the-wall time-travel sci-fi movie that focuses on Marty and his family, Part 3 is a slower, more meditative, and character-driven Western drama that focuses on Doc Brown as he gets to live his dream of living in the Old West, all while falling for a school teacher named Clara Clayton, and ultimately parting ways with his lifelong friend and his fears of tearing apart the space-time continuum to live his own quiet and peaceful life with his family. Well, until he builds the train time machine, at least. Another thing I really love about the sequels and the entire trilogy as a whole is how well they use repetition to form one singular and cohesive narrative. So many key scenes from the first movie are repeated once in both sequels, like when Marty is awakened by his mom, or in the case of Part 3, his great-great-grandmother, I guess, or when Marty's being chased down by the Tannins, and they always end up with them getting covered in manure.
Something very familiar about all this.
Some people say it's lazy and or derivative, and that it's a cheap way of reminding people how good the first Back to the Future was. But in the case of this franchise, I'd say it's more of the polar opposite. This is literally a trilogy that deals with repeating history and the consequences of changing one's past. On that note, I think it makes perfect sense for this trilogy to constantly repeat key moments and gags that the first film set up as a way to remind people that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. In every instance that Marty McFly is called chicken, or in the case of Part 3, yellow, because being called chicken and yellow are the same thing, I guess. It's a good way of teaching this lesson. Like, literally his arc in the sequels is that he got called chicken once by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which led to his hand breaking during a street race and he couldn't play guitar anymore, and also he got fired by 2015, until he learned from an Irish-sounding Michael J. Fox that it's the same thing that got his brother killed, and so he doesn't end up racing Flea after all. Yeah, if I had to point out flaws in these sequels, it would definitely be the fact that this is the closest Marty ever gets to his own character arc.
Jeez. I would have hit that Rolls Royce.
And going back to what I said about this trilogy forming one singular narrative, the endings of the first two movies all feel like they go straight into the next one. And I really love how, when you marathon these movies all together, I guess George Lucas explains this best.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
But looking back on the Back to the Future trilogy, I'm forever grateful for the lessons that these movies have taught me more than anything. The third one literally ends with Doc Brown saying that we should make our futures good ones. And I think it's actually a really sweet and uplifting life lesson we should all keep in mind. Time is gold, and every second is one that we can never get back. And I really love how this trilogy teaches us that we should make the best of our lives right now so we can build even better futures for ourselves. Because if we don't, we'll probably end up in our own personal dystopian Biff Tannen-esque 1955s. I'm not gonna make that kind of joke, by the way, and you can't pay me to do it. And I'm also forever grateful that these movies were pretty much my gateway into the never-ending possibilities of storytelling in cinema. These are movies that prove to us that movies are pretty much creative sandboxes. We can do anything we want. We can say what we want. We can make up our own rules. We can say things that the world needs to hear. These movies made me love movies, and in turn made me want to be a filmmaker and tell stories of my own. And in turn, inspired me to take up communication arts in college, a course that's made me feel more alive and creative than I've ever been my whole life. And if I'd never watched this trilogy when I was younger, I don't even know who I'd be today. Not too long ago, I made a video talking about another movie I love called Your Name, and how it changed my life and pretty much everything else outside my love of film. But here's the thing, if Your Name changed my life, then the Back to the Future trilogy made my life. You know that scene in The Fabelmans when young Steven Spielberg saw The Greatest Show on Earth in theaters, and he loved that movie so much that he decided to become a filmmaker after seeing it? The Back to the Future trilogy, specifically the first one, is my greatest show on Earth. Which is even funnier since Spielberg himself was an executive producer on this trilogy. And I guess if there's something important to take away from these movies, it's that if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Like I've always told you, you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Well, that was a lot of fun. This is the second video essay in a row where I've talked about a piece of media that left a big impact on my life. It's always nice to make videos talking about stuff I actually love. With that being said, I wonder what my next video essay is going to be about.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Oh.
And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
Oh.
I came from nothing, less than nothing. I will not give up.
Oh.